I keep contact naturally with my family and my friends. I make a great effort to. My friends are very important to me, and uh, I go often to the United States.
Grace Kelly was Hollywood's most coveted star, earning $250,000 per film and winning an Academy Award by age 25. But in 1956, she made a choice that would destroy her forever. A secret letter, hidden for decades and discovered only after her tragic death, revealed the devastating truth. I feel like a caged bird in a golden palace. The bars may be made of diamonds, but I'm still trapped. What drove America's princess to such despair? The answer lies in a story of sacrifice that went far deeper than anyone imagined. Grace Patricia Kelly was born into Philadelphia high society on November 12, 1929, but she was determined to earn her own spotlight rather than inherit it. Her father, Jack Kelly, was a wealthy businessman and Olympic rowing champion who initially opposed his daughter's theatrical ambitions. "Acting is no profession for a lady," he declared, but Grace possessed something that couldn't be taught or inherited, an ethereal screen presence that would captivate the world. By 1950, Grace had conquered Broadway and set her sights on Hollywood. Her breakthrough came with High Noon in 1952, starring opposite Gary Cooper. The film industry immediately recognized something extraordinary. Here was a woman who possessed genuine aristocratic grace mixed with undeniable star power. Studio executives were mesmerized by her contradictions. She could be both regal and approachable, sophisticated yet warm. Grace commanded respect in ways most starlets couldn't. She arrived on set prepared, knew her lines perfectly, and treated everyone from directors to grips with equal courtesy. Clark Gable famously said, "Grace is the most beautiful woman I've ever worked with. But more than that, she's a lady in every sense of the word." Her co-stars were protective of her, recognizing something precious that needed safeguarding. By 1954, Grace Kelly was Hollywood royalty in every sense except the literal one. She earned more per film than most male stars, had her pick of roles, and commanded the respect of the industry's most powerful figures. MGM had plans for her spanning the next decade. At just 25 years old, she had conquered America's dream factory, but her greatest conquest and her greatest tragedy was still to come. Alfred Hitchcock became obsessed with Grace Kelly from the moment he saw her screen test. He cast her in 3 consecutive films: Dial M for Murder, Rear Window, and To Catch a Thief. Hitchcock called her his perfect Hitchcock blonde, cool and sophisticated on the surface, but hiding passionate fire beneath. Their professional relationship was unlike anything either had experienced before. Grace understood Hitchcock's vision instinctively. She could convey volumes with a single glance, suggest danger with a slight smile, and make audiences fall in love with her while never quite trusting her. In Rear Window, her chemistry with James Stewart was electric. In To Catch a Thief, she matched Cary Grant's charm scene for scene. Hitchcock pushed her to explore her sensuality in ways other directors never dared. Their collaboration reached its peak with To Catch a Thief in 1955. Filming on the French Riviera, Grace was at the absolute height of her powers. She was 26 years old, breathtakingly beautiful, and commanding $250,000 per film. Astronomical money for the time. The world was quite literally at her feet. Every major studio wanted her, every leading man wanted to work with her, and every role seemed written specifically for her talents. But during the filming of To Catch a Thief, something happened that would change everything. The Cannes Film Festival was taking place nearby, and Grace agreed to a publicity photo shoot that seemed routine. Little did anyone know that this single photo opportunity would end her career forever. The countdown to Hollywood's greatest loss had begun. The Cannes Film Festival of 1955 was supposed to be just another glamorous stop on Grace's promotional tour. The French Riviera was magnificent. Grace was the undisputed queen of the festival, and To Catch a Thief was generating incredible buzz. Then came an unexpected invitation that would alter the course of her life forever. Prince Rainier III of Monaco, a 32-year-old bachelor prince, had agreed to a photo opportunity with Hollywood's biggest star. The tiny principality desperately needed publicity, and Grace Kelly photographs would generate worldwide attention. What was meant to be a brief staged encounter at the prince's palace became something entirely different. The chemistry was immediate and undeniable. Rainier was immediately smitten by Grace's intelligence and genuine warmth. Grace found him charming, educated, and refreshingly different from the Hollywood men she knew. He spoke 5 languages, discussed art and politics with genuine knowledge, and treated her with a respect that had nothing to do with her fame. After their meeting, Rainier reportedly told his aide, "I'm going to marry that woman." Their courtship was conducted through passionate letters and expensive transatlantic phone calls. Rainier pursued Grace with the determination of a man who had never been denied anything he truly wanted. He sent rare orchids flown in from exotic locations, made surprise visits to America, and painted a picture of a life that seemed lifted from a romantic novel. But there was pressure from sources Grace didn't fully understand. Monaco was in severe financial crisis, and Rainier needed to marry and produce an heir or risk losing his throne to French annexation. Grace represented more than love. She was his kingdom's salvation. The weight of an entire nation's future was resting on their romance. When Prince Rainier proposed to Grace Kelly in January 1956, it wasn't just a marriage proposal, it was a binding legal contract that would fundamentally alter her existence. The dowry alone reveals the transaction's true nature. Grace's father was required to pay $2 million to the Monegasque treasury, equivalent to nearly $20 million today. This wasn't love, it was a business deal wrapped in romance. The marriage contract, kept secret for decades, contained clauses that would systematically destroy Grace's identity. She was required to renounce her American citizenship completely and embrace Catholic doctrine in ways that conflicted with her Presbyterian upbringing. More devastating was a clause buried deep in the legal documents. Grace was explicitly and permanently forbidden from continuing her acting career. MGM executives were absolutely furious. They had Grace under exclusive contract for 6 more films, including a dream project opposite Cary Grant that was already in pre-production. The studio threatened devastating legal action, claiming Grace was breaching her contractual obligations. Studio head Louis B. Mayer reportedly screamed at Grace, "You're throwing away the greatest career in Hollywood history for what? A postage stamp kingdom?" Grace herself seemed torn between 2 worlds. In interviews from early 1956, she spoke carefully about taking a temporary break from acting, not ending her career entirely. She believed, perhaps naively, that she could return to Hollywood after fulfilling her initial royal duties. She had no idea that the cage door was already closing behind her. The wedding preparations consumed months and cost a fortune. Every detail was orchestrated for maximum global publicity. But behind the glamorous facade, Grace was already beginning to understand the magnitude of what she was sacrificing. The wedding of Grace Kelly and Prince Rainier III took place on April 19, 1956, in Monaco's Cathedral of Our Lady Immaculate. It was genuinely called the Wedding of the Century, broadcast live to 30 million viewers worldwide. The guest list read like a Hollywood who's who. Cary Grant, Ava Gardner, David Niven, and European royalty filled the cathedral. Grace looked absolutely radiant in her fairy tale gown, created by MGM's costume department at a cost of $65,000. But those closest to Grace noticed something troubling in her eyes during the ceremony, a distance that hadn't been there before. Her sister Peggy later recalled, "Grace looked beautiful, but she seemed like she was performing a role rather than living her life. There was a sadness behind her smile that broke my heart." The transformation from Grace Kelly to Princess Grace was immediate and brutal. Every aspect of her life now required official approval. Her wardrobe was scrutinized by palace protocol officers. She couldn't leave the palace grounds without security clearance and official escorts. The spontaneity and freedom that had defined her personality were systematically eliminated. Monaco itself proved claustrophobic for someone accustomed to the vastness of America. The entire principality covers less than 1 square mile, smaller than New York's Central Park. Grace often stood on her palace balcony, looking out at the Mediterranean, feeling trapped despite the magnificent view. She wrote to her friend Judy Balaban Quine, "I can see the entire country from my bedroom window. Sometimes that feels suffocating rather than liberating." The honeymoon period, both literally and figuratively, was shockingly brief. Within months, Grace realized that her fairy tale marriage was actually a gilded prison. The real Princess Grace story was just beginning, and it would be far darker than anyone imagined. Princess Grace's daily routine was regimented in ways that would have been unthinkable during her Hollywood days. Every public appearance was choreographed down to the minute. Palace advisors dictated her clothing choices, her hairstyles, even her facial expressions during official functions. The woman who had once collaborated creatively with the world's greatest directors was now told exactly how to hold her hands while cutting ribbons. Her royal duties were endless and often meaningless to someone of Grace's intelligence and artistic sensibilities. Charity galas, ceremonial functions, and formal dinners filled her days. Grace had been accustomed to creative challenges, to collaborating with brilliant minds, to bringing complex characters to life. Now, her greatest challenge was staying awake through another mind-numbing official ceremony. The press, which had once celebrated her achievements, became her constant tormentor. Every expression was analyzed for signs of unhappiness, every gesture scrutinized for protocol violations. Grace couldn't have a bad day without it becoming international news. The woman who had once controlled her image through carefully crafted performances now had no control over how she was perceived by the world. Letters from this period, discovered in her private papers, reveal her growing desperation. "I feel like I'm disappearing," she wrote to Rita Gam in 1958. The woman who won an Academy Award, who worked with Hitchcock, who had dreams and ambitions, she's being erased bit by bit. "I don't know who Princess Grace is supposed to be, but I know she's not me." The isolation was crushing. Grace was surrounded by people all day long, servants, advisors, officials, but she had no real friends, no confidants who knew her as anything other than a royal figure. The loneliness of her position became more apparent with each passing month. Grace threw herself into motherhood with the same intensity she had once brought to her craft. Princess Caroline was born in January 1957, followed by Prince Albert in March 1958, and Princess Stephanie in February 1965. The children brought genuine joy into her life, but they also brought additional responsibilities and restrictions that further limited her freedom. As a royal mother, Grace couldn't raise her children according to her American instincts. They required private tutors, personal bodyguards, and adherence to protocols that went against everything she believed about childhood. She desperately wanted to take them to a McDonald's, to a baseball game, to experience the simple pleasures she had known growing up. These normal activities were now impossible. Grace became fiercely protective of her children's privacy, often clashing with palace officials who wanted to use the royal children for publicity purposes. She fought battles daily to give Caroline, Albert, and Stephanie some semblance of normal childhood experiences. These small rebellions were Grace's way of maintaining her sanity and her connection to the woman she used to be. The children became both her greatest source of happiness and her deepest source of worry. She was terrified that they would grow up as isolated and restricted as she had become. In letters to friends, she expressed fears about raising children in a fishbowl where every mistake becomes front-page news. But even motherhood came with royal obligations. The children's births, christenings, and every milestone became state occasions requiring extensive public ceremonies. Grace found herself managing not just her own oppressive schedule, but protecting her children from the same scrutiny that was slowly destroying her spirit. The weight of responsibility was becoming unbearable. In 1962, 6 years after abandoning Hollywood, Grace received a script that would test every sacrifice she had made. Alfred Hitchcock had written Marnie specifically with her in mind, crafting a complex psychological thriller that was exactly the kind of sophisticated project Grace had always loved. The master director knew his former star was dying creatively and made an unprecedented personal appeal. Hitchcock flew to Monaco personally to persuade Grace to return to filmmaking. During their private meeting at the palace, he was shocked by what he saw. The vibrant, creative woman he had directed was gone, replaced by someone going through the motions of royal life. "You're wasting the greatest talent I've ever worked with," he told her bluntly. "The world needs Grace Kelly, the actress, not just Princess Grace, the ornament." Grace was absolutely desperate to accept the role. She read the Marnie script multiple times, imagining herself back on a film set, collaborating with the director who had understood her artistic soul better than anyone. For weeks, she wrestled with the decision that could have changed everything. She even began secret preparations, studying the character and discussing wardrobe possibilities with Hitchcock. The role would have been her triumphant return to serious filmmaking. Marnie was a complex character study of a troubled woman, exactly the kind of challenging role Grace had always sought. Working with Hitchcock again would have reminded the world why she had been considered one of the finest actresses of her generation. But the Monegasque government and palace advisors intervened decisively. They made it brutally clear that any return to acting would be seen as abandoning her royal duties and betraying the people of Monaco. The choice was stark and final: remain Princess Grace forever, or lose everything she had built in Monaco. There would be no compromise, no middle ground. After Grace's tragic death in a car accident on September 14, 1982, her personal effects were carefully cataloged by palace officials. Among her most private papers was a letter that had never been sent, dated 1976, 20 years after her marriage to Prince Rainier. The letter, addressed to her old friend and fellow actress Rita Gam, revealed the devastating depth of Grace's unhappiness in heartbreaking detail. "Dearest Rita," the letter began, "I write this knowing I may never have the courage to send it, but I desperately need to tell someone how I really feel. The fairy tale that everyone believes is my life has become my beautiful prison. I wake up every morning in the most magnificent palace in the world, and I feel like I'm suffocating." The letter continued for 4 handwritten pages, describing her profound loneliness, her crushing regrets, and her desperate longing for creative fulfillment. "I see my old films sometimes late at night when the palace is quiet," she wrote. "I watch that woman on screen, so alive, so passionate, so free, and wonder where she disappeared to. Did I murder her when I accepted this crown?" Most heartbreakingly, Grace wrote about feeling like a complete fraud. "Everyone envies my life, but they're envying someone who ceased to exist in 1956. I smile and wave and perform my royal duties perfectly, but inside I'm screaming. I gave up everything I truly loved for duty and obligation, and I'm not sure anyone appreciates the magnitude of that sacrifice." The letter revealed that Grace had been battling severe depression for years, masked by her flawless public appearances. She felt trapped in a role she could never escape, performing a character she had never wanted to play. The discovery of this letter fundamentally changed how the world understood her story. By the late 1970s, Grace had found some limited outlets for her suppressed creativity through cultural work in Monaco. She established arts programs, supported emerging artists, and occasionally narrated documentaries or gave poetry readings. These tiny creative outlets were like drops of water to someone dying of thirst. They kept her alive, but reminded her constantly of what she had lost. Her relationship with Prince Rainier had cooled into a polite but distant partnership. They maintained separate schedules, appeared together only for official functions, and rarely seemed genuinely happy in each other's company. Grace had fulfilled her side of their unspoken bargain. She had given Monaco international legitimacy and produced the required heirs. But the personal cost had been devastating. Friends who visited Grace during this period consistently noted her restlessness and her tendency to drink more than she used to. She would disappear for hours, driving alone through the winding mountain roads above Monaco, the same treacherous routes that would eventually claim her life. These solitary drives were her only remaining freedom. On September 13, 1982, Grace was driving with her 17-year-old daughter Stephanie when she apparently suffered a stroke. The car plunged 45 feet down a mountainside on the notorious Route de la Turbie. Grace died the following day from her injuries, just 1 day before her 53rd birthday. She was gone just as she might have been ready to reclaim some version of her authentic self. The world mourned Princess Grace with genuine grief, but perhaps they should have mourned Grace Kelly, the actress who had died 26 years earlier, sacrificed on the altar of duty and obligation. Today, Grace Kelly's films are studied in universities and considered masterpieces of American cinema. Film historians regularly debate what incredible performances were lost when she abandoned her career at age 26. She was younger than most actresses reach their creative peak, yet she had already demonstrated range and talent that could have sustained decades of brilliant work. The secret letter found after her death has fundamentally changed how we understand her story. What appeared to be a fairy tale romance was actually a tragedy of unfulfilled potential and systematic suppression of artistic genius. Grace Kelly, the actress, was sacrificed for Princess Grace, the symbol, and both identities suffered immeasurably. Her children have spoken more openly about their mother's private struggles in recent years. Princess Caroline has acknowledged, "My mother taught us that duty must come before personal happiness, but I think she paid far too high a price for that lesson." Prince Albert has admitted that his mother carried regrets about the path her life took that she never fully resolved. Modern actresses facing similar crossroads often cite Grace Kelly as a cautionary tale. The entertainment industry has evolved dramatically since 1956, but the fundamental questions remain. How much of your authentic self can you sacrifice for love, duty, or societal expectations before you lose who you are entirely? Grace Kelly's story continues to resonate because it challenges the fairy tale narratives we desperately want to believe. Her life proves that sometimes the princess doesn't live happily ever after. Sometimes the crown is unbearably heavy, and sometimes the palace becomes an inescapable prison. The real tragedy wasn't her death in 1982. It was the slow death of her spirit that began in 1956.